Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Gorn podcast. And today I had the luxury of traveling out to Oak Park and hanging out with Mike Powell. Mike, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Angel?
So Mike, for the listeners that don't know who you are, could you give them a quick little background before we get into all the talk with Beat the Streets?
I'm a former high school teacher and wrestling coach. I'm still helping a little bit at the high school, but I'm coaching a youth club in Oak Park now, and I've now taken over as executive director of Beat the Streets Chicago at a really exciting time.
So, Mike, you're a very humble guy. So for the listeners out there, Mike's he's a highly regarded wrestling coach in the state of Illinois, and I'd say one of the best high school wrestling coaches out in the country. So in terms of, this opportunity to talk to Mike, it's always a pleasure just because Mike's been around a lot of successful wrestlers, athletes, and he carries a great skill set, and that's coaching. So Mike, let's get into it. How was this weekend for Beat the Streets Chicago?
It was good. I think we generated a lot of interest and energy around the name Beat the Street Chicago, and that's kind of what our first year is about, is bringing people in, building the culture and growing our name and our reach. And this was big for that. A lot of players involved, but it was a lot of generosity this week. It was really just an incredible weekend of service and giving and great wrestling.
So for listeners, could you explain what exactly Beat the Streets is and what the organization is all about?
So our goal is to empower youth through wrestling,
Sure.
and to do it in the toughest areas of the city of Chicago. We serve within city limits, the 2.7 million people in Chicago.
Yeah.
But we really, it's kind of a hard thing to put your thumb on. We have our hand in every ounce of wrestling in Chicago outside of what's done by CPS. Mm-hmm. So I'll be at the CPS championships this weekend, just kind of represent Beat the Streets.
Yeah.
But I don't know, 25 of those teams wrestle on Beat the Streets mats. Wow. So we're supporting kids. We're providing shoes. We're providing headgear. We're providing, opportunities to wrestle over Christmas break or whatever, off-season training. So we work hand in hand. We've developed a good relationship with CPS, and then we have a bunch of private clubs too.
Sure. So when this all first started formulating and getting together as a concept, what was the first steps into starting the organization?
Well, I think we had to. The organization is 27 years old, 28 now.
Okay.
And they've been around, and they had some great years. And then right before I came around, there were some real thin years where they weren't raising much money.
Right.
They weren't doing much. They weren't serving many kids. And frankly, the organization was not being run, in my opinion, the way it could have been. It could have been run. It was run by high school wrestling coaches essentially. Mm-hmm. And it's a non-for-profit. It's a 501c3 charity. It should be run like a charity. You put board members who are lawyers and doctors and got people that have been uber successful in their life,
sure,
who are connected to potential friends, potential donors, people of influence. We did that, so we expanded the board. We've added new players to the board. We replaced some players who maybe weren't meant for that type of work, and and then we restructured the organization. We hired a program director, we hired a director of operations, and so now we're kind of a three-headed monster right now, and we're looking to continue to expand. We're going to open our own facility soon, and we received our first major gift this fall, so we're raising money at a pretty good click, and we're trying to build awareness, and we're trying to build the number of kids we serve. We started 6-7 now new IKWF programs in the city of Chicago. Now they're not big, but between those 7, there's 110 plus kids in them, and they're wrestling on the weekends. They're getting opportunities to be. We have Jordan Blanton coaching, Eddie Valdez, and these guys are D1 wrestlers.
Right.
So we've got some great things going right now.
So when it comes to these kids that are out on the streets and whatnot, how do you target these kids to come in and encourage them to try a sport out like wrestling?
That's a big struggle. It is hard right now to get the word out. It's hard to get parents bring kids to practice. I mean, if we had all the kids that wanted to wrestle on our teams, we'd have 500 kids on those 7 or 8. We're going to add an 8th team here. We'd have 500 kids. You walk into a school, I want to wrestle, but getting to wrestling practice 8 blocks away, when you're 9 or 10 years old and you have a mom that's working 2 jobs and there's not a father in the house is really a difficult task.
Sure.
So we're trying to tackle that challenge. We're trying to partner with other non-for-profits. We're looking at buying our own vehicles and hiring drivers. I mean, there's quite a bit to it. But once we open our own gym, we're going to turn it into a neighborhood hub. I'm going to go to every church. I'm going to go to every community organization. I'm going to go to the police. We're going to go everywhere we can go and say, get kids in our door, and we'll put them in a sport that's going to change their lives. And it's not just going to be this gym is not just going to be a wrestling gym. It's going to be a community place where you come after school, you get tutoring. We're about almost locked in on a donated computer lab.
Wow. With
all the software. So we're connected to a guy that was a Microsoft executive,
sure.
And he's working that angle for us. And so it's a pretty good gig right now. But the goal is that Bobby, when he's 9 years old, walks into the gym a lot like Muhammad Ali did with the Police Athletic League in St. Louis. Or is it St. Louis? I think he was. Where's he from? Louisville. He's from Louisville.
Yeah, there you go.
And find the next Ellis Coleman there. You know what I mean? They're out there. Ellis Coleman's from the west side of Chicago. Terry Martin, who's about to graduate college, double major, captain of his wrestling team. He's ranked top 10 in the country. He's from the west side of Chicago. And so how many Terry Martins or Ellis Colemans are there? How many Kendrick Sanders are there? Wrestling saved his life. He told me his story this weekend. His mother passed when he was 11 years old. His father wasn't in his life, was raised by his grandmother. Said if he didn't find wrestling, he would be in a bad place right now.
Right.
So, we want to get 2,000 or 3,000 of those kids through our door the next couple of years within our clubs too, and with a SCORE program that we partner with CPS SCORE. So we got a lot of things, but that gym we want to be our central hub.
Yeah.
We want that to be a community center. We want it to be a place where people are proud to represent in their community.
Right.
I'm a wrestler. I'm a beat the streets wrestler. And if we can get a kid to buy in at 9 or 10 or 11 years old before puberty hits and before they start identifying themselves, you know what I mean? You start feeling yourself as a man when you're 13, 14, 15. But if you're a wrestler and you eat right and you sleep right and you don't gangbang, we got our own gang over here.
Yeah.
These are real tough guys.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're actually doing hard work.
Right.
That's a whole different story. I mean, a couple of years from now, we're going to have a squad.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic because it just dawned on me, these kids that are coming in, they're staying out of trouble. But on top of it, they're learning how to defend themselves. So, when they're out on the streets, and sometimes, anything can happen in life. These kids that are learning how to wrestle will be able to defend. Basically, just learning how to defend yourself. Wrestling is one of the best bases to learn how to defend yourself in any type of physical altercation. So, in terms of these kids that are coming in, how have they responded to, coaching and just a sport like wrestling?
Well, the guys that are there, they love it. Now some of the kids we're teaching what hard work is.
Right.
Part of that buy-in process is earning that, and some kids are really taken to it, and some kids are. Wrestling is a hard sport. The attrition rate is high, so we're trying to keep all the kids. But my thought on wrestling being difficult is you don't make it easier necessarily. You convince the kids that hard is good. That hard is that forging your character through hard work and teaching discipline and toughness is important. And if the kids buy into that, they're willing to put themselves through more. And for me, in my 20 years of coaching, you don't change lives through soft wrestling practices and playing dodgeball every day. Not that you shouldn't, not that it shouldn't also be fun,
right.
But it's the hard parts. It's the difficult things once you get them bought in that it actually forged character, right? That actually changed lives. It's the it's the, not that we'd have 10-year-olds cutting weight, but it's the tough weight cuts. It's that fourth match of the day when you're tired and you tough it out and you find a way to win in overtime, or you fight and you don't find your way to win, but you come out of there tougher. And so, you know, for us, it's like, it's about gaining buy-in with these kids. And if we start with 20 in a club and we finish with 10, but they're all in and their lives are going to be changed as a result, I think that's a really good thing. So our goal is to retain, but it's also to forge. You know, it's also really to build real values, real transferable values. Our values are accountability, grit, gratitude, you know, these things that are really meaningful for someone's life. And you don't change lives through Mickey Mouse after school programs. You don't. I mean, your life wasn't changed because you were half in. No. You know, my life was changed because I was a real wrestler. You know what I mean? It wasn't even natural for me to be a real wrestler, but you know, my time spent, you know, really forged my character, changed my life, taught me about suffering, and it taught me about these values that we are trying to instill in these kids. And so that's what happened to our coaches. That's what happened to the adults involved in Beat the Streets. And so now we're trying to give it to these kids. And I'm getting back to my original point. It's got to be hard. There has to be sacrifice. And what that means is the attrition rate is decently high. But the guys that stay, you know, are changed forever. And so I keep telling the people involved with the organization, you know, we want 2,000 kids, but we want to change 400 lives. You know, we don't want 2,000 kids that say when they were, you know, 25 and are, you know, living aimless lives. Yeah, I wrestled for a year. You know, we want 400 of those kids to stay in and wrestle for the next 10 years. And get them to college and get them back to be mentors with us or do their internships with us and come back and coach for us and be involved. And we're, you know, that's what we're doing now is we're kind of creating the first generation of guys it's going to change Chicago wrestling.
It's such a crucial correlation from wrestling to your work ethic. And if you can really buy into wrestling, you can really form a good work ethic in yourself. And so for you, how do you go about the practice format for these kids in this program?
Well, I'm not coaching. From day to day, but we created a curriculum. That we. You know, I
guess that's my question.
We've created a series of videos for our coaches to play a bunch of combative games that are rough. You know, that are also fun but hard and competitive. You know, a couple of basic techniques, and so we're just kind of at level 1 right now, and our coaches are running our curriculum and technique, and that's where, you know, I think I'm helpful. I've been doing it for years, and now I'm coaching with the little Huskies at Oak Park, so I'm learning a bunch about how to coach kids wrestling, and so it's you know, it's very different than coaching a top 10 wrestling high school team in the country. So we're kind of in the beginning phases, but it's working out. I mean, our kids are learning moves, you know, and they're learning wrestling, and you know, the Beat the Streets kids that were there, not all of them could stay all day, but they were there on Saturday. You know, that stuff is about, you know, learning from Tony Ramos, but also just being around wrestling, being around you know, getting Kamal Bay to sign your shoes, you know, wrestling Kamal. You know, Kamal was wrestling. At one point, I went up to the restroom. He's wrestling 10 little Huskies and Beat the Streets kids. You know, it's probably 5 and 5, and they're all wrestling him together. You come out of that day and you're a wrestler. You know, that's more than the curriculum or how we're doing things. That's just what we want. You know, I don't really care if the kids are using jump moves or, you know, if you call yourself a wrestler and you're all in, and I can get you over to this gym we'll teach you how to wrestle. That's not
all
hard.
That matters.
If you're dedicated and hardworking, it's not that hard to be good at wrestling. No. It just isn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have to work hard, but the nuts and bolts of finishing a single leg are pretty easy to teach. You know, for a guy that's been doing it for 20 years.
No, and I'm coming from the perspective, I started my freshman year of high school, and for most kids, you're way late in the game, buddy. Like, you know, you're a freshman in high school, your fundamentals, your technique, you're way behind. But in terms of the work I put in, I was able to qualify my senior year And for me, that was an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, big time.
You know, because of being in the sport for only 4 years and qualifying for a state, especially in Illinois, where, you know, this is some of the best wrestling you got in the country. It means something when you say that, because it's like people think wrestling's so hard. And so when they see it, they sometimes get discouraged. And I'm not speaking for everybody, but for a lot of people that, you know, sway away from wrestling, it's more or less the fact that it's a hard sport.
Oh, yeah.
But if you dedicate the time and effort to just learn, you know, you get better, hands down.
We're trying hard to convince these guys that hard is good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that we're the group, not like the rest of society.
Yeah.
You know, these potato chip eating video gamers. There's
Fortnite.
you know, maybe there's a place for that, but it's not my place.
Right.
You know, we live in this other world, this 10% or 20% of the people that believe in hard work.
Right.
You know, that believe in the people that built our railroads and worked in the steel mills. You know, my grandfather came from the Ukraine and worked in the back of the yards. You know, so
yeah.
I take that stuff seriously. I, having come from a suburb and a pretty plush life, appreciate my time in wrestling because of the difficulty it created in my life. And I recognize it now as a really important part of my, you know, very important part of it. So we're trying to do that. You know, this idea that if you're from the west side or south side of Chicago and you have it difficult and you live in a tough neighborhood, that somehow it makes you tough. These kids aren't tough. They're soft as marshmallows. They're round. They're soft. They can't do a pull-up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because here, literally, if you're a good kid in a bad neighborhood, you stay in your house.
Right.
You go from school and you get to the apartment
Yeah.
and you stay in the house because you don't want to be out there.
Right.
Now, are there tough city, you know, street city kids?
Sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
But do they know what work ethic is?
Yeah.
Do they know what showing up to practice every day is and grinding it out?
Right.
You know what I mean? When you can just walk around the street puffing your chest out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And every once in a while getting into a fight, that's very different. That kind of toughness is very different than the grit it takes to show up every day, bust your butt, get pinned in front of a bunch of people, come off the mat humiliated,
Yeah.
get barked at by a coach. You know what I mean?
Right.
Push yourself physically and mentally in a way you've never been pushed. That's what we're trying to get these guys to do. The kids that buy into that, you know, buy into working hard. They buy into staying up late and doing the paper their junior year in high school and finishing their junior theme and studying for their ACT and getting on to college.
Yeah.
And so that's the stuff we're trying to do.
So what's the ages you're bringing in for your organization?
9 to 24.
9 to 24. Oh, really?
Our goal is to have a place where the college, the ex-Beat the Streets guys, we are going to have a place. You know,
Oh, wow.
We're going to, the ex-college guys come back.
That's awesome.
And are either training with us or are with us as interns, coaching and training with us. And we're creating an opportunity for them to go overseas and train and wrestle, compete. And, you know, with big-time coaches and guys coming in. So our Team Elite, Beat the Streets Team Elite, you got to try out for that in the spring. We'll have 2 of those this year. The college guys will come back. They'll all mix it up.
Yeah.
You know, our goal is to create, you know, a similar thing that we did at Oak Park. You know, I opened up a room, didn't really, and I charge a couple bucks now, but we invited everybody and their mother in to wrestle with the Oak Park guys.
Right.
Knowing that when you foster community and you do that stuff and you get a bunch of college guys coming in or got really good guys from this school or that school, kids are going to get better.
For
and
sure.
they're gonna call themselves wrestlers.
Yeah.
You know, the right now in CPS we have a lot of great kids, really talented, great coaches, but not very many of them call themselves wrestlers. They just do wrestling.
Right.
You know, there's a difference. We need you to train year round. We need you to travel and find workouts. We need you to look for competitions. We need your coaches to take you to competitions. And when we start doing that, then we're going to have angels. We're going to have 4-year wrestlers who are state qualifiers.
Right.
And then the next generation, the guys that are starting in 5th grade, they're coming in and now they're 3-time state qualifiers and 2-time place winners.
Yeah.
And then the group comes in and now they're 4-time state qualifiers and we get our first state champ out of Beat the Streets. And that's not that far off.
Bro.
You know, we need to create it. We're building it, but I don't think it's that far off.
Yeah, I think another dynamic that I kind of miss harping on with these kids that you guys are bringing in and working with is they get to learn the aspect of a team, being a teammate and being around other team. Just being in a team environment, it's huge for your growth, I think. And what type of dynamic do you guys play in the role of Beat the Streets with that, as far as a team goes?
Well, so we've with all these IKWF clubs have their own name.
Right.
They have their own mascot, right? They're all Beat the Streets, but like there's the Bulldozers, there's the Dog Pound, right? So there's all these groups, and we have not done this, but we're probably a year away from fostering some kind of like dual meet format for them and doing Friday night dual meets where you come in, you represent your team. Right now, everybody comes to the Beat the Streets informal or the event, and we do a Beat the Streets cheer at the end. And we talk a lot about it. Everything they have on them, all their shirts, everything says GEI and Beat the Streets. Thanks for your partnership.
Thank you.
So, you know, we're trying. It's a hard thing in kids wrestling.
Yeah.
IKWF is very much an individualistic thing. The tournaments are all individual. You know, it's very different than IESA. And I like the IESA model much better.
Could you explain that for listeners?
Well, they wrestle as a team. You know, you wrestle, you represent your school. You represent your school with honor, with dignity. You win and lose with honor and dignity.
Yeah.
And as opposed to like the superstar kids wrestlers jumping clubs.
Yeah.
You know, we got to go to this. You know, my dad and I are traveling here. And you know what? There's a place for that. I mean, there really is. I don't think there's a place for that for kids who don't want to do it. But if kids are driving the process, I mean, that's how you get the Dayton Fixes of the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, and I travel, you know, for going at some. I had all sorts of tournaments, and it's crazy to see some parents travel across the country for their kids to compete in some of the best tournaments.
I don't think you have to do that. I think training high-level training is far more important than high-level competition. When you're 10, your frontal lobe, you're not developed enough to be in super stressful situations. Now, if you got a stone cold killer like David Taylor, I just watched the video, he won all those Tulsa championships. Okay. But along the way, David Taylor smashed a bunch of kids who really didn't want to be there. They were there because of their father's ego.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Their dad didn't quite do what he was supposed to do in high school, and so now he's living vicariously through his kid. That stuff really gets to me.
Yeah.
You know, I love my saying is, you know, it's the guy that never made the varsity.
Yeah.
You know, God never whipped anybody.
Well,
in
we
his
talked
life.
about it in the last podcast we did with the Psycho Wrestling Dance.
Yeah, and so, and then there's, you know, it's a continuum. So, you know, there's a lot of talk around about this or that. Sorry about the phone.
No, you're fine.
That you know, this dad's going to ruin his son. But there's, you know, my dad pushed me a little bit.
Yeah.
I never questioned whether he loved me. I never had to go to Tulsa when I didn't want to go. So there's probably somewhere in there. And I look back at it now. Had my dad not pushed me a little bit, I would have quit the sport. I was soft. I was talented, but I was soft.
Right.
And so there's probably somewhere in there. You know, you don't want your kid to walk away from something that you know is going to be good for them, but you don't want to make it about you. So when you're in Tulsa and you see the guy abusing his kid after the match, that's a problem. That kid's going to live in his dad's basement when he's 30. You know, he's going to have emotional issues for a long time because the dad can't control himself. But the kid that says, you know what, Dad, I do want to go. And then when he wimps out and he pins himself in the quarterfinals and the dad says back at the hotel, you know, what happened? I gave up. Yep. Do we give up in our family? No, we don't. Okay, son. So that's a great lesson to learn. You know, that's a different thing. You know, then so there's a continuum there, and I've come full swing on it. You know, I want dads involved with Beat the Streets.
Right.
I want moms involved, and I want moms who, when the kids walk off the mat being a wimp, to say, "Get your butt back on that wrestling mat," and you know, act like you're representing our family in your club and Beat the Streets like a man or a woman. You know what I mean? So there's probably a sweet spot in between, you know, laissez-faire.
What about the dads that, because I've seen this too, where the dads that have won those state championships and might have been a national champion, they're still that same dad that are grilling their kids for like, because I see, and it's a sad story because I see a kid that comes up that has to live under a big name, and he might not want to wrestle, or he's trying to wrestle but he's not as successful as his father. What do you think about that dynamic?
I look at Jim Jordan or Jeff Jordan.
Yeah.
And his kids seemed, I don't know, but from afar, I watched him, I really observed him coach his sons, and I loved it. So I think he's the model. Now, I don't know if they ever had a choice that they were going to wrestle, any of that stuff, but they seem well-rounded, good, interesting people.
Right.
I want my son to play piano, and I want him to be well-rounded, and I want him to be a wrestler too. I have a kid I told you he's about to be 4 on Saturday, and so I bring him around wrestling. Right. I talk to him about wrestling. I wrestle with him. I'll bring him to practice, and then he'll have to ask me if when he's ready to compete, he'll have to tell me I want to compete.
Does he like being around it so far?
Yes, but he's soft. I mean, he's a marshmallow. You see what he's growing up in. You know what I mean? He really is. Right. So he's a wonderful young man, and he's soft. And I think wrestling will do him a lot of good. I won't push him into it, and I will never, ever attach my own ego to my son's accomplishments. I want my son to be a better man and a better student than his father was. Yeah. Everything else is gravy. Yeah. I would love for my son to be the next David Taylor. Yeah. He's not going to be. Right. Right. If he spends 10 or 15 years in the sport and gets out of the sport what he's supposed to, huge win for me. Right. Yeah, it's huge. So for a guy that's going to grow up, going to country clubs and doing the things that my son's going to do, learning hardship through wrestling is important. Yeah,
I have twin brothers that they're in college now, and one of them's at Milwaukee School of Engineering. And
great school. We have a guy up there.
Okay.
Who's wrestling? Is your brother wrestling?
Yeah, he's wrestling for MSOE.
Drew Maddox.
Okay.
They're 65-pounder.
Yep. So that's actually, my brother is a 65-pounder there.
Ooh. Are they going at it?
Here's the thing with my brothers. So growing up through high school, and they wrestled in youth club. They kind of liked wrestling, didn't take it serious, so took a year off, and then they went back into it their high school career. Didn't really have anything as far as like a great accomplishment of qualifying for state, but they stuck with it for 4 years, and that was what I wanted them to do. Yeah. Go through 4 years of wrestling. I don't care what you do during it, but you're gonna finish it through. Do it the right way and learn. Yeah. And so my brother, he's just doing it for the love now, and so he's practicing with MSOE. And what I really preach with them is, I don't care if you do anything in sports. I just care about what you do in life. Yeah. So well,
he's at a great school.
Right. And that's what matters most to me, is like, I don't care if you wrestle for MSOE, but it's the fact that you made it this far and you're at one of the best schools in the country, and you made the honor roll and you're a wrestler. Good. And so that's all that matters.
That's right. He's going to get out of the sport what he needed to.
Exactly. So, Mike, let's talk a little bit about this past weekend. I was actually out of town. I was in Colorado for other events, but let's talk about the Beat the Streets event.
It was great competition. Yeah, there was some fire on the mat. There was the Coach Palazzo from Lake Highland Prep got real fired up in the first duel. So it was, I love that heated competition stuff. The Oak Park Montini duel was a little bit disappointing in that we had a couple guys out, they had a couple guys out. They bumped away from one of our good guys. We bumped away from one of their good guys. So I think if Oak Park makes the state finals, that'll be a little bit different. Hopefully more competitive. Last year's duel was awesome, at least from Oak Park's perspective. So, hopefully they get to see each other again in the state finals. Every duel was competitive. There was a lot of close matches, so that was great. It was a great honor to meet Dave Bell in person. He's an incredible man. The Bergen Catholic coach. I know Palazzo. I know Izzy. Izzy jumped at the chance to do this for Beat the Streets.
That's awesome.
So it was really incredible. And then there was a couple other things. One, the Kendrick Sanders and Kamal Bay show. Kendrick filled in for Ellis Coleman.
And if you could tell the listeners who those names are.
Okay, so Kendrick Sanders is U.S. Open champion, 3-time high school national champion. I think he was like 160-4 in high school.
Very good wrestler.
3-time Florida State champ. several time Fargo champs, University National champ, U.S. Open champion. He's known for the power bomb. You can look him up. He's the guy that spikes people on their head in Greco. He's an awesome kid. Flew in, stayed here with us on the drop of a dime. I mean, I called him and bought him a plane ticket an hour later.
Wow.
And I'm like, I hope he makes the plane. I don't know him. I don't know if he's responsible.
Right.
He got up. He was here. He was super generous.
That's so awesome.
Just an incredible gesture. But there was 5 guys that had similar gestures on the weekend. 5, yeah. But so Kamal Bey's a world champion. He's a 20 and under world champion. He's a U.S. Open champion. I think he was 7th in the world championships this year. They call him the human highlight reel for a reason. You can look up his world championship highlights that track wrestling did last year. They're incredible.
I think you spoke on the last podcast we did. Yeah. He was one of the most athletic wrestlers you've ever coached.
He's the most athletic person I've ever seen.
Wow.
And now he's matured. Mm-hmm. He's owning his own, training. He knows what he needs to do. So now he's really just become an incredible kid. Kamal spent the entire day at Oak Park on Saturday.
Oh, I saw pictures, man. It was so cool playing with the kids. Yeah,
wrestling with kids, signing autographs. At one point, he was facilitating a football game. On the practice mats. I mean, it was magic for the kids that were there. There's some Twisters there, some Beat the Streets kids there, some Oak Park kids. There was a couple of Arlington Cardinals. There was a couple of the Carroll Stream Club, the Cougars, Villa Park Cougars, I think. Whatever club feeds into Glenbard North.
Yeah.
And so it was really just awesome. So and Kendrick was around for the kids too. So here's what the best part about all this, right? At a time when these guys are professional athletes, they are literally being coached. Don't you dare do clinics without this much money being up front. You have to, from what I hear, Kyle Snyder and David Taylor are $10,000 for a clinic.
I can confirm that.
Okay, so
I can confirm that.
Nothing against that. Good for them.
That's a lot.
If you can get somebody to pay you that, great.
Yeah.
But the guys that coached me, that changed my life, did it for free. I have coached for negative probably $250,000 in the last 20 years. This sport needs generosity, and it needs people at the level that I'm at right now, at the Beat the Streets level, at the ground level. The true litmus of how healthy wrestling is you look in our urban areas. The most populous place, 90% of the population is in urban areas. And how many of those kids are wrestling? That's the future of wrestling. And I'm just learning this now. I'm literally, we border the west side. We're a mile from the west side of Chicago right now.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this for 20, I had an idea.
Right.
But now, and frankly, I was probably part of the problem, coaching elite wrestling teams, you know what I mean? So, but now I'm looking at this from a groundswell level. We want to grow wrestling, and that word, grow wrestling's tossed around a lot, and I don't even know what it means. But if we want to build more wrestlers, you got to do it in the urban areas.
Yeah.
Because there are just so many people. There just aren't that many people in Liston, Iowa, or Lisbon, Iowa, or wherever it is. So 5 guys: Joe Rao, Robbie Smith, Tony Ramos, Kamal Bey, Kendrick Sanders, 6 guys, and Alice Coleman all volunteered their time to come here for free.
Awesome.
I mean, it was incredible. I want to cry when I talk about it. I talked to Tony Ramos's mom at the event. I said, it is just, at a time when this guy could have said, I want 5 Gs.
Easily.
I mean, he's a huge name.
Easily could
I
have
want
said
5 Gs. He reached out to me and said, I'm flying out there on my own dime. I want to do a clinic for Beat the Streets. Then I asked him at the place, would you donate your shoes? We had everybody sign the shoes, and we had a pull-up contest for the shoes. I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
So it was such a day of generosity. There were so many volunteers there. These coaches jumped on board to come to Oak Park, wrestle in a field house, fly out on their own dime. I don't know what a trip like that costs from Poway, California, but it's a lot.
Get them out.
So for these guys to do all that, these coaches, these wrestling studs and celebrities, all the people that came and bought VIP tickets at $50 a pop, they got great lunch and a T-shirt.
Sure,
we try to make it worth the ride and special seating. But I mean, it was a bunch of my teen parents bought tickets. It was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, that night it was over. I exhaled and I said, man, the world's a good place.
Yeah.
At a time where all this terrible, you can get access to the worst things that are happening in the world. I felt just filled with joy and gratitude and optimism. And that's what we want around Beat the Streets. That's what we want people to feel when they come to a Beat the Streets event.
Yeah, how was it? Because I had Robbie on the podcast a couple months ago, and man, he was my longest podcast. We spoke for about 2 hours, and I didn't want to stop the podcast because he just every story he came out was awesome, and his story in general coming up as a kid is just very, very unique and different from a lot of wrestlers in the aspect he never really wrestled in college or anything. So how was it working with those guys specifically in the aspect of them coaching throughout that day?
Well, Robbie's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank God he was there.
Yeah.
So Dave Maricatani, who is an incredible play-by-play guy, is not a natural pump-up-the-crowd announcer.
Right.
So Dave had the idea to give Robbie's there. And Robbie's like, how come you didn't have me do it? I'm like, man,
yeah, Robbie's a great hype man.
Professional. I had seen Robbie.
Yeah.
Robbie takes the mic from Dave. It was Dave's idea. I think they both kind of conferred on it, but and that's when the crowd started getting into it. So Kamal and he starts calling out the crowd, and all of a sudden they're into it. Now the kids who were sitting mad side are into it, and then the Kendrick and Kamal show became this really a spectacle. I mean, it was an amazing thing.
Yeah, how did that go?
I mean, I don't want to overestimate it, but if you're a kid in that crowd, there's some studs in that crowd. There's a bunch of kids that are now all in on wrestling.
Yeah.
That was my goal. Match. You know what I mean? I wish we didn't have 100 kids. We probably had 100 kids sitting around the mat. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe less than that.
Sure.
But I wish there was 400 kids.
Yeah.
Because those kids are all in. Because they saw how fun, how technical, how explosive, how awesome wrestling could be. Yeah. It wasn't a 3-2, I'll grab your leg twice and you grab my leg twice match. These guys were throwing.
They were going at it.
But they were throwing each other all over, and the crowd wasn't involved. So remember that everybody had a placard, and they get to choose who to vote for. If you have not seen this, it's worth going. Now, obviously, if you buy the Trackcast, Beat the Streets gets a significant portion of that, so please do. But it's worth going and showing your child how great wrestling can be. That was my goal, is for these guys would walk away from that and say, wrestling's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a wrestler. And I think we need more of that. For you or I, an adult Uber fan, which there aren't that many of.
No, there's not.
Seeing a Thomas Gilman, Tony Ramos 5-3 match is awesome because we can appreciate, but no 10-year-old watches that and says, I really like the way he placed his hand here and the way he finished it by shelving the leg here. Right. And you know what I mean? So, you want to see explosion and energy, and that's what Robbie created. That's what Kendrick was amazing. I didn't know he was the showman he was. He stole a big portion of the spotlight, but of course Kamal's spotlight is pretty big.
Yeah.
So, between the two of them, it was an incredible show. And, I hope that it'll catch on. I hope the wrestling world will do more of it. Yeah. Because those are the kids who we need to get to buy in if we want to #grow wrestling, whatever that means. But
that takes the city.
Yeah, there you go.
So, Mike, thank you for your time once again. Got a couple more minutes with you. Just to end this conversation with the Beat the Street Chicago, how can listeners help? How can we bring value to you guys, and where are the outlets and channels where we can go to donate or whatever it is we can do for the organization?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. We need coaches. We have a mentoring program. We need mentors, young professionals who are ex-wrestlers who are successful and can pass their knowledge on. It's not a huge commitment, but we need more of them. We need money. We need advisory board members. We are going to start like a young professionals board.
Yeah.
Guys that want to be future board members, kind of like a young board, an associate board, or something like that. So we have an advisory board. We have a real board. So we're looking for major players to get involved. We're looking for funding. We're looking for sponsorship. You can go to our website and find my contact easily. Everybody in the wrestling world's got my cell phone number, but my email address is on our website, btschicago.org. We need help. We need financial help. Yeah. And right now, the only thing that's limiting us is, I vet the coaches pretty well. Good coaches.
Good coaches.
And money. And as we grow, we're going to need more and more of that. This gym is going to cost us quite a bit of money to open, and we've started raising money, but we need a lot more. And this gym is going to be game changing for the neighborhoods, and so.
So in terms of the schedule for Beat the Streets, when's the next big event? What do you guys got going on this next year?
We have a huge program that's we're hoping to serve over 300 kids in our partnership with SCORE, which is essentially a unique program. SCORE is like the sports program for Chicago elementary public school students.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
CPS SCORE, they call it. It came out of the ashes of when CPS dropped 4 years ago, dropped all 4.5 years ago at this point. They dropped all junior high and youth athletics in a day.
Oh, wow.
33 wrestling programs were dropped on that day.
Why?
Budgetary reasons. You want to
specifically
know
wrestling?
Why?
Yeah,
because they're idiots. You know what I mean? Because they squandered a bunch of money because our state is don't get me on my high horse.
Yeah, I know.
But those kids that were supposed to go to wrestling practice or volleyball or soccer, they're gangbanging. And 4 years ago, the 17-year-olds were 13 and the 16-year-olds were 12.
Right.
And these guys were defining who they were at that moment. And then they get nothing to do but to walk the streets after school. So anyways, SCORE came out of that. But it's not nearly as robust as their program was. So we approached them a couple years ago about starting a program. We fund a significant portion of it. We find the coaches. We train the coaches. We recruit all the athletes. But SCORE provides us facilities and bus rental. They provide us with trainers.
Resources.
Yes. So we kind of share the resources. So we had 6 locations last year. We're going to have 10 this year, and we hope to serve 300 kids and get these kids into wrestling for the first time. It's pretty cool. We're going to put on a freestyle and Greco tournament. We're going to do a developmental this spring. We're trying to put together right now a girls clinic. We've got a couple other things in the works. We're bringing together the first ever Beat the Streets national duels.
Oh, wow.
So we're trying to bring all the Beat the Streets programs in to do a national duel tournament.
Yeah, I've been working with Beat the Streets Providence
in
Rhode Island. They just rebranded themselves as, I believe, Beat the Streets NYC.
Yeah.
But, Stephen Keith over in Rhode Island, man, it's so cool to see how a sport like wrestling can bring a bunch of kids that have no clue about the sport come in and not only become wrestlers, but become friends with other kids that they thought never would be friends with.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that I saw with the dynamic. Because I've been to Rhode Island the past 2 years now for Beat the Streets, and I've seen these kids grow not only as teammates but as good buddies and friends that support each other. It's one thing to be on a wrestling team, but it's another thing to be on a wrestling team and encourage your other teammates to do their best.
That's the idea behind this national duels thing, is to build that identity of Beat the Streets, where it's not just a ragtag group of guys.
Right.
It's a real organization. You got to remember, there are 19 Beat the Streets programs nationwide.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Give or take.
Some guys are kind of Beat the Street,
Yeah.
But we're going to have our 6th and 7th come into the national organization. It's a pretty arduous process to become the part of the national organization.
Oh, really?
But my goal is in 5 years that the Beat the Streets National Duels is a place where college coaches are coming to recruit. It's a real deal.
Wow.
We can do this.
Yeah.
Remember, 90% of the population of our country is in the cities. These are some tough, athletic, kids who are looking for something to do.
Right.
Let's go find the Ellis Colemans. Ellis would have done all right at the Beat the Streets National Duels. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
We can get those guys. And so we're going to start that this year. We got a bunch of stuff in the works, but that's kind of the lot of it.
So I guess my last question for this conversation in terms of Beat the Streets is what's the big goal for 2019 in terms of your role in the organization?
We want to open our own gym. We want to raise money.
Yeah.
Money equals opportunities in the not-for-profit world.
Right.
And we want to continue to expand the number of kids we serve, and we want to improve the way they are served. So I am not a guy who can watch a wrestling practice that starts late. whose mats aren't taped, who had, you know what I mean? Things are changing at Beat the Streets in terms of the level of
efficiency
and expectation of excellence. You know, it's one of our core five core values is excellence. And you know, if Ellis Coleman can come and put his shoes on and be ready for practice every single day at Oak Park, he could have done it on the west side of Chicago too.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so kids, they long for structure and expectations. And I'm trying to change that. I should say, shouldn't say me.
Right, I get what you mean.
We have a whole organization.
Yeah, sure.
But we have a bunch of coaches now who have bought into this.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, you say what you do what you say, you be accountable, you show up on time, you work hard, you expect your teammates to hold the same high standard as you, and then things start to be awesome.
Yeah.
You know, you ask Frank Popolizio what is his magic sauce, and he'll tell you that he doesn't have one. They do everything right. They don't cut any corners. Right. And he's taking these guys who, if they would have gone to a different program, might not have been, you know, I don't know if Tariq Wilson is third in the country if he's at a different program.
Right.
But when you are held to the highest standards day in and day out, that's what we did at Oak Park for years. That's what changed everything.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to build that into city wrestling. It'll be built into our gym. We want to build it into our youth programs, and we want to have proud people. You know, we want to have proud young men and women, proud about how they do things and how they live. And so we're going to continue to build that in 2019, and hopefully we go from, you know, I think we had served 243 kids last year, and we're hoping to serve 600 this year.
Wow.
And our goal is 2,000 by 2021. So we're out there. We're doing it.
Yeah. And, you know, you talk about those values that you put into your coaching back when you were coaching. I remember you were preaching this from the get. You know, I don't need to teach my kids 1,000 moves. I need to teach them 3 moves, and I need to harp on it every single day, and they need to do it right every single day, and that's how they get better.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, how many wrestling moves do you see Jordan Burroughs have?
Right.
He can scramble, he does, but he's got a handful of things.
Right.
You only need a double if it's world class.
Right.
Right. So this idea that, you know, and maybe it's a little different when you're teaching a 9-year-old. You want to expose them to a lot of things, find out where their body is good at, how what their style is gonna be. But I'm not one of those throw everything at the wall and see what sticks when a kid is 16 years old. If you're gonna get a kid good from 9th grade on, you're gonna have to find out 2 or 3 things that they're good at, and then you have to make them good enough at it to score it in the state semifinals or the round to be a state place winner. You got to teach them how to wrestle hard enough to be an all-state wrestler, because there's a level of fitness and toughness and how hard you're going to move your body. And that's more important than most other things.
Right.
So
that's a good segue into my second to last question. Yeah, second to last question.
Okay.
Is we're approaching, you know, the end of the season for these high school kids in wrestling, and I was just thinking, what's a good question I can ask Mike Powell that will make him think about himself? And so my question is, what would you tell yourself back when you're 13 years? So say you time traveled, you go back to your 13-year-old self, your freshman year, and this is middle of January, you're approaching, you know, regional, sectional, state. What would you tell that Mike Powell back then? What piece of advice would you have for him?
Just as I'm trying to peak at the end of the year, peaking's a choice, right? It's a choice. I tell our guys every year, you know, I walked into the assembly hall my senior year in high school, the one year I got it right.
Yeah.
I took a deep breath and I said, I'm about to kick everyone's ass here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I watched Alan Stallings do that. I watched Isaiah White do that. You know, the guys that walk into assembly hall with a chip on their shoulder, you know, that's a thing.
Right.
That's a choice. That's not God-given. That doesn't just happen. You know what I mean? As you hone in, and I mean, you should hone in on your best techniques.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You should work on your short time rides. You should work on your short time escapes. You know you're going to have to finish a short offense or a single leg in a big match. So there's things that you have to do technically, but it's a choice to feel fresh. It's a choice to feel good. No, everybody's banged up. Everybody has a
Yeah.
bum wrist or tweaked knee or partially separated shoulder. Everybody does. But how you choose, bouncing before pumping up your team, getting everybody around you fired up, being the guy that always is having a great time in practice at the end of the year, single most important thing you could ever do. So for me, you make the tough choice.
Peaking's a choice.
It's a courageous choice, right? It is a brave choice.
What do you mean by that?
Right? Well, because it's easy to have self-doubt. Self-doubt is simple. Self-doubt is giving in.
Right.
Right? Braveness is a choice. I mean, Jordan Burroughs is Jordan Burroughs. Kyle Snyder is Kyle Snyder. Not because they're great world-class athletes. There are a ton of world-class athletes.
Yeah.
They have something mental in their mental game.
Right.
David Taylor, Kyle Dake have something in their game that is different. You watch the calm and the pure joy that Jason Nolf, exudes on the wrestling mat.
Oh, that's insane.
He's got it.
Yeah.
He's
owns
got
it.
whatever it is, he's got it. So you watch him, and as a kid you say, I could never do that. You know what I mean? That's a coward's way out. Of course you can do that.
So you think you could obtain that?
Of course.
You don't think it's just something that certain people are born with?
I didn't see him that way. He was probably in somewhat that way. He probably is very gifted in that sense because he's world class.
Yeah.
But the fighting for that level of enjoyment, of feeling free when you wrestle, wrestling and flowing from one position to another and just exuding the utmost confidence in whatever you do is work.
It's like
It's way harder than finishing a single leg.
Yeah.
It's way more important. And wrestling is so much more mental than people think. You know what I mean? I watch Austin Gomez. I don't know what he has, but it's special.
Yeah.
His ability to believe he's going to win every wrestling match is what gets him there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things he doesn't do fundamentally correct.
Right.
But man, is that kid a gamer.
Yeah, I think of another young stud, Gable Stevenson.
Oh, yeah.
That guy, he a big stud in high school, and then he goes out for Minnesota, and he's just wrecking heavyweights.
Yeah, I've known Gable since he was 11 years old. He was like pounding kids in our high school wrestling room.
But that's like that attitude you're saying. He has that mental switch where he owns it.
And here's the thing is, those guys probably, a lot of that came naturally to them. That was probably their disposition. But it doesn't, but you can create that, right? If toughness is a choice, mindset is a choice. And I've watched it. And Jordan Burroughs will tell you about his evolution in terms of his mindset. And if you listen to his severe performance anxiety issues and how he overcame them, or you talk to Helen Maroulis, who choked her way out of the 2012 Olympics. Yeah. I mean, she lost to a girl who she had whipped previously, handled. A lot of those guys are religious-based sports psychology, which I think is an incredibly powerful thing. Sure. But that's real. And talking to your youth about it and building it into the 9 and 10-year-olds is super important. And the 11 and 12-year-olds, before they get to high school and start thinking that wins and losses reflects their character or their identity. You know what I mean? The only real thing that ever will reflect your character is your effort, your attitude. And if you exude excellence and confidence and you flow the way Jason Nolf does, and you know what I mean, then you're gonna be the very best you can be. And that's when you're 40 years old and long retired and hobbling around like I am. That's all I wish I could say to myself when I was 13 is you want to spend your career in wrestling and be uber proud of who you are and how you represent yourself. I can't say that about myself, and I wish I could.
Well, Mike, my last question.
Last question.
Yes, as I always close out the podcast, and I know you've answered this before, but I hope you can put a twist on it. When somebody tells you, Mike, you have to go earn it, what does those 3 words, go earn it, mean to you?
Well, I want to make sure I answer somewhat the way I have in the past, but I guess it's probably...
It's been a while,
to be honest with you, it probably varies.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of different answers from the Ed Roos, Seth Gross, Steve Makos.
Put your head down and grind and do it day in and day out, and enjoy the grind and enjoy the process. And, you wake up and you're 23. If you start wrestling at 13 and 10 years into having dedicated your life wholly to something, you've earned whatever you get at that point. And 3 months or 3 years or 10 years, it's the same thing. But for me, throw yourself 100% into the process, and enjoy that process, and keep perspective on what that process is doing to your life and to your character and into who you are. And for me, that you're doing that, you're going to earn whatever you have, right? So I tell our guys a lot. You wake up, you grind, you're grateful for the grind.
Yeah.
And you do that day in and day out. And if there's gratitude in your heart, and passion in your eyes, and then, you'll have earned whatever you got coming to you. Whether that means a state championship or an NCAA championship or not, right, you've earned it. And the biggest thing you can earn in wrestling is those transferable values. Grit, excellence, accountability, delayed gratification. They're really important things. And so for me, that's what you should be going to earn. You know what I mean? The championships, either they happen or they don't. Fight like hell to get them, right? But at the end of the day, you do what you do and I do what I do, because we want to forge good men and women. Right. And we want them to buy into that. So that's kind of what Go Earn It means to me at this point in my career.
So Mike, thank you for your time. As always,
thank you, Angel.
Pleasure. Mike, where can listeners find you? Follow Beat the Streets Chicago.
We're on Twitter, BTS Chicago 1. We're BTS Chicago on Instagram. We are on Facebook. Our website is btschicago.org. We are looking for coaches. We have a coach, is a head coach at a CPS school, who heard a podcast I did. It might have been the one with you. And reached out to me. He got a job in Chicago. He is now a Beat the Streets coach, and he's a head coach of CPS, and he's making a difference.
Congratulations.
He's a game changer.
That's awesome.
We want to find 20 of those guys in the next couple of years, and we want to build the city with good, young, passionate coaches who want to be city coaches and Beat the Streets coaches. And so we're looking for you guys.
So Twitter, Facebook page, Beat the Streets Chicago. Yep. Instagram, Beat the Streets. I think it's at BTS Chicago.
Yeah.
So listeners, please check them out. They're a great organization. They're all over the country,
and if you follow us, you're going to get to see soon. We're getting a highlight done of the Kamal and Kendrick deal. So
awesome.
The whole day we're going to have a highlight of the whole day, but
awesome.
It'll be out in the next couple of weeks. So pretty cool.
Mike, thank you for your time. That is another edition of the Go Earn It podcast. Take care, guys.